Okay, good morning. We are continuing, hopefully concluding Hilchos Tevilas Keilim today. Now, we just want to review or learn a few interesting topics, ramifications, and then to wrap it up. A little bit of a review and definitely some new material. Okay. Halacha l'maaseh. Now, what happens if you have electric appliances? I guess one of the most common ones is going to be a hot water urn, or some what they call in Hebrew like a kumkum, to heat up hot water. So it's okay. So in general, if you look at what most poskim write, it's a modern day question. Most of them say electric appliances bi'ikaron archayev. There's no automatic ptur on electric appliances. That seems to be the majority. But I guess some of the poskim who say that they are be'etzem chayev would be the Shevet Halevi, Igros Moshe, Minchas Yitzchak, and Shevet. Yeah, I said Shevet Halevi. Okay, whatever. So, but in most sources, you will see that's the halacha. However, okay, first of all, just as a practical thing, dipping an electric appliance in water, if it gets wet. So generally speaking, if there's a computer chip, anything that's a sophisticated piece of electricity, it will probably get ruined. So the poskim say, don't do that. You have to find a solution or assume it's mutter. But definitely do not dip anything, even for a second, if it has an electric component that will get ruined. So don't. However, if it's a very simple element, and generally speaking, again, it's hard to know, but generally speaking, if it's a very simple element and it gets wet, it will not get ruined. All you need to do is let it be completely dry. You have to make sure that there's no water stored in a little area, in a cavity, but it needs to be completely dry, and let it dry for a couple more days when it's completely dry. So then, generally speaking, it will not get ruined. There's certain websites that talk about it, and they say we take zero responsibility if you dip it, and I state the same. I take zero responsibility if it gets ruined. So if you're worried for real that it's going to get ruined, probably don't dip it. If it is, and I've heard people say I've dipped it and it never got ruined because I made sure it got dry. And I've heard of people saying, well, it did get ruined. So I don't know. Okay, back to the poskim. So now there is one heter mentioned by the Chelkas Yaakov in Aleph Kuf Vav. Anytime it's mechubar lakarka, it's not chayev in tevila. The Aruch Shulchan even points out, as an aside, if you have a huge container, something that's too big, or just it's huge, it's not called a klei seuda, because you're not going to bring that to the table, or you don't work with it in your kitchen, and so it's not chayev in tevila. That's just an aside. And they quote in, I think it's B'Shem Rosh Zalman's, a kli that you don't move around from person to person is also not going to be chayev. It's not called a klei seuda. Okay. Anyways. So, I don't know. Probably, I don't know. Right. So, okay. So I don't know. Now, but so that the question is, when you plug it into the wall, into the outlet, the sheka, does that turn it into a mechubar lakarka? So I think most poskim will say that doesn't do anything. That's a little bit of a joke. But the Chelkas Yaakov says that makes it mechubar lakarka, and therefore, anytime you have an appliance that it's not meant to be used unless it's plugged in. Again, maybe battery is different, but certainly if you plug it in, if that's the way it's meant to be used, so he says it is putter and you don't have to take it. That's okay.
the only one?
The only one that I know that says that heter. Again, there's a lot of things that it's only written once, but doesn't mean only one person holds of it. I don't know. Now, the Starkey quotes of Heinemann, who says, anytime you have a kli that will get ruined if you dip it into, it's a din of anus, and therefore it's mutter, you can use it lachatchila. So anytime you have a thing that you believe or you're worried is going to, but again, you have to be knowledgeable worried, not just you yourself are worried. But anytime there is a chashash, it's going to get ruined, then it's automatically mutter without dipping it. Because it's honest, and Chazal, we're not, either it's pure honest, or even Chazal wouldn't even say that you have to. So either way. But it's mutter, bottom line. Igros Moshe has an interesting kula. He says that you only have to dip the part of the kli where the water goes to, and not where the element is. I mean, it depends if the element's on the bottom or underneath the kli, like there's an underneath part, or you have the element up on top. It depends what it is, ayin sham. But basically, let's say, for example, you could take an urn and dip the entire urn upside down, although it has to get wet. So I don't know. But up until you get to the plastic part, or the bottom part where the element is in, you can, could be, as long as you keep on immersing it all the way till there, the water will keep flowing up inside. I'm not sure, but...
Well, I mean, no. Otherwise it would leak out at the bottom when you fill it. But you can open the,
anyway, so you turn it upside...
the barriers, and the air will come out. Until
no, but you have to, let's say the element's on the bottom of your urn.
Right.
You just turn it upside down and push it all the way in.
You open the spout, the water will go
right. So you make, and you put so then you dunk it in up until there. He says that that's good enough. Because the entire part of the kli that's used for liquid got used, and the bottom element, the bottom section, is considered a separate kli, and that portion doesn't have the water. It doesn't need to get toveld. Just the other part does, and there's no issue of chatzitza because the base that never got wet is considered. This is his chiddush. I don't know if most agree or not. But then that portion is beit hastarim, and anything that's beit hastarim doesn't have to actually get wet. Mm-hmm. Just like inside of your body, you go to the mikvah, anything that's it's underneath your skin doesn't have to actually get wet. Okay, so he says you should dip it, but only the part that's going to have the liquid. Okay. One second. The question is, what about the cord? So many say you have to dip the entire item. They don't agree. And do you have to even dip the cord? So obviously they disagree with that, Rav Moshe. That's Menashe Klein, or Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and Rav Elyashiv. That says, again, if the kli is not going to get ruined, then Mamela you have to dip the entire kli as a whole, including the cord. What's it called? Yeah. Minchas Yitzchak says you don't have to do the whole cord, just the part that's attached. Okay. But anyways, I believe a cord will dry out and will not get ruined, or dry it right away. So the cord is not such a big deal if you're going to already dip the entire item. Now, a couple solutions to... So, obviously, if you buy an appliance that was manufactured by a Jew and always owned by a Jew, it doesn't need to go to the mikvah. Another option is that you buy it from a goy, and you want to. So we said a couple possible heterim, or take it to the mikvah. But another way out is you have a Jew take apart the kli. You have to undo the kli and make it non-usable as a kli. So either you drill a hole in it and it'll leak, or you assemble the base, if that's even possible. And that's one way. And then the Jew, so now it's no longer a kli. It's now pater, even though it was owned by a non-Jew. You put it back together, and now it's chayav. What about if you... Now, so then it became pater, and now the Jew formed it into a new kli, and now it's not chayav, because it's owned by a Jew. Another way what about just taking apart the electric elements? So one opinion says it's enough to take apart just the cord, because now it can't be used for its normal intended purpose. Even though it's still a cup, it's no longer can be used for its intended purpose. Another opinion says that's not enough, but you have to take apart the electric elements. So it's a whole machloket, what needs to be done to make it good enough. We'll just leave it and go on. Another possible solution is give it to a goy and borrow it, and then just borrow it back. Like we said, sometimes you can do that just for Shabbos, or if there's no mikveh available on a temporary basis. But generally, giving it to a goy is a very unrecommended loophole to do on a regular basis. It's only for an absolute, I have to use it for a few days and I have no way to go into the mikveh. So using it for an electric appliance, again, depends if this is the only solution. Should it be done on a regular basis, long-term basis? So that's the as far as giving it to a goy. I will just, now that I mentioned about giving to a goy, how do you give it to a goy? So again, this is relevant for mechiras chametz. How do we sell our chametz? It's more of a choshen mishpah question, but I'll just point out the only way that works clearly according to everybody is if you hand it to the goy and he lifts it up 1 tefach. That's maybe 3, but 1 should be enough. So that's the only for sure way to do a proper kinyan to a goy without any shaila whatsoever, is if you're going to give it to him, have him lift it up, or when you give it to him, it was already in his hand. And if it's too heavy, so then you can do mashicha. You fully move it, the entire space that it encompasses, you move it out of that space. You drag it out. Okay, so that's the way to physically make a kinyan with the goy. The other possible ways, we're just going to mention them, chalipin, or a shtar, the contract, or odisa, you claim it's his in front of people, witnesses, or you mezaka ayidei another person, or you give him, or he buys it, he gives you money for it, or kinyan chatzer. So those are possible ways that might work. Maybe probably less practical too, but those are all possible ways. To be mafkirit, that's also another. That's also another solution. I was going to get to that, but let's just say that now. If you're mafkirit, that also might work. It's a question if mafkirit works. So we'll just leave it as so. It's a better solution to give it to a goy than to be mafkirit. But if you have no one to give it to, and you're stuck, that is a definite solution. Okay. In other words, it's but.
Between metal and glass on
I don't know. Okay. Fine. So that answers that one. Now, I'll just point out one last solution by when you're dipping an electric appliance of water. Now, first of all, if you are going to do it, you just have to dip it for a second. I mean, obviously, the whole inside and outside has to get wet, be immersed, but it just has to be in there for a second so that water, you don't want water to start draining inside a cavity. Rav Gilman, I'll just point it as a question, pointed out maybe there are certain fish substances that we're going to get to when we learn Hilchos Chatzitza. There might be a substance that's moist that will seal an opening, but not constitute a chatzitza. So I haven't really seen that in the poskim, but that definitely could be a solution. Again, how practical that is, I don't know, but that definitely could be a solution. Let's keep this in mind when we learn Hilchos Chatzitza soon. Okay, let's continue the next topic. Let's finish. Okay, I will just mention that anytime you have, this comes up, I'll leave it as a little bit of a question. When we get, this is from Seif Vav and mainly Seif Zayin. Anytime you have the main portion of a kli is metal, or it's chayev, the main part of the kli is chayev and tevila, So it seems pretty clear. Lamaisa and the minhag is any time, even the handle, if the main part of the kli is metal, but the handle is, let's say, plastic, which is not chayav, it's still chayav with a bracha. We're going to discuss peelers in a minute as a whole, but just as an example, or maybe a blender, but the word I'm thinking of is a grinder. What's a grinder for? What's the proper word? Like
A mill.
A mill, or like what you have for your peppers at home, pepper mill. So whatever those. So anyways, those items, even though the main part is metal, but the entire thing, kimat, the entire thing might be plastic or wood, it's still going to be chayav tvila with a bracha. That's what seems to come out. Might be a machlokas, but that's what seems to be is the minhag. And a handle of a blade. Generally, part of the blade is inside the handle, but even if the entire handle would only be plastic, it would still be chayav. A knife, all these items would still be chayav with a bracha. Okay, so that here. Now what happens, this is important. What happens if you show up at a friend's house who is not tovel? So, or you go to a restaurant and you show up and he's not tovel as Keilim. He keeps kosher, or he bought you kosher, but it wasn't tovel. So generally speaking, we assume the best practice would be to use a plastic fork or use something else to avoid the problem. However, okay, let's say it's difficult to do that. You can't do that. So let's say the food is brought to you on a plate hasn't been toveled. So here, the Shulchan Zalman, Igros Moshe, Rav Elyashiv, they all say you're allowed to eat with it. Let's say that plate, you're allowed to eat off the plate. It's a metal plate, a glass plate that wasn't toveled. You pick it up with your fingers and you can eat from it. That I believe everyone agrees, or at least they all agree, that you're allowed to eat straight from it. Because you didn't put the food on the non-toveled plate. It was given to you like that.
So you can't use the fork?
So to use a fork, they all say you cannot use a fork. Again, I'm going to say one last thing in a second, that maybe you could, but karon, everyone says you cannot use their metal forks. You have to, but we're not there yet. Right now, can you eat off of what they serve you? So you can eat off of their plate, you can eat off of their, right, because be'etzim, you can, it's already sheval tasa, they're the ones who did it, you're just removing it, and, okay, what happens if it's a liquid? So there, the Igros Moshe and Rav Elyashiv says you can't use it. Let's say they give you a glass, right, or a metal cup with liquid. Then they say you cannot use it because by drinking from it, you're mamish using it, because otherwise it would just spill all over the place. So you're really using the cup, or it can't. If it's a solid, you can pick it up with your fingers, and the plate, it's there. But if it was on the table, you can still eat it. So there, you're not so much. It has both tzadim, that it's not really sheval taser, or it also depends. You're picking up the cup and holding it. It might not be called sheval taser anymore. So they're more machmer by that. Shulchan Zalman says no. You can even drink from it because it was put there, not by your choice. So now you can just use it till it's empty. Okay, this is a little bit related to buying it from bottles, from the markets, and drinking straight from there. Now, let's go a bit further. Now, what happens if you don't have a plastic fork to use, and you don't have where to pour it into, and you're stuck in your friend's house and the hotel or the restaurant? So Rav Shlomo Zalman says, it's quoted in Minchas Asher, that you're allowed to use it. You don't have to run out. You're allowed to use it because you're anus. Okay, in this situation, you're anus, and Chazal will not be matzrich you to leave the house and go shopping for a fork or whatever it is. You're in his house, and that's what he has. And again, maybe you should be machmer, but if there is no plastic fork or whatever, you have no choice, you're allowed to use it. So even though we mentioned by most poskim would be machmer by restaurants, that's if you're the owner. But as a guest, this Rosh Zalman's another snif leheter to use it. Again, maybe you should go to a different restaurant. But anyways, that's that. And I think we mentioned, as Avnei Nazel points out, that anytime there's no mikveh in town, you're allowed to, just as a, not really a kashur, but sort of relevant. It just reminds me of it. If you're in a place where there is no mikveh, you're allowed to use it. You don't have to not use dishes and use your fingers because you have no choice. Okay. I think, let's just run through a few simple examples and we'll call it. Okay, important few examples. Let's say you buy a coffee jar, okay? Often you can buy reusable coffee and you have a coffee jar that's glass. So we discussed the first time use. But what about removing it? What happens? Can you keep on reusing it? Right? You finish your coffee and now you want to pour in from the bag. So the Igros Moshe, you have a coffee mug, coffee jar. You finished it. You finished all the coffee. Now you want to refill coffee into there or other foods. So we learned, according to the Igros Moshe, so some are machmer, but many are mekel. Why? Igros Moshe says it's what's it called? You created the kli. You bought the kli. You bought the coffee. The jar came with it. So he holds that when you bought it, when you just the kli was bata to the coffee, and therefore it was never chayav. It's not considered you buying a klei seuda. It's you bought coffee, and when you decide to turn it into a kli for the future, you create ki'ilu, at least for this halacha, you created the kli for being a kli seuda, and therefore only now you created it, and so therefore it was never a kli seuda of a goy, because he never intended it to be for food as eating with it. He intended it to be just as a package. So that's the Igros Moshe. The shach for coffee wouldn't be a problem because coffee is not edible until you recook it or reheat it, remelt it. Again, instant, non-instant, depending how you want to interpret it, but
so therefore,
it could be. So it's like it's anything that's not used at the table, and it's not ready to eat it right away. You're not going to take a spoon and shovel the coffee into your mouth. So if you're using it for coffee, even according to the shach, coffee jar would not be a problem. If you're going to refill it with something edible right away, then the shach, that you don't have a heter on that shach svara by sakin shchita. And then there's also an issue of storage. Anyway, so there is what to rely on refilling it, but that's again, it's a machlokas. Okay.
So
we'll save it for after. A peeler. Now, what about a peeler? So basically we said, l'maisa in general speaking, it's chayav because not only, if you only use it on raw potatoes and you buy it for only raw potatoes, so then it's a suffix. It's a machlokas if it needs to be tvila or not. But generally we all use peelers also for, let's say, carrots or cucumbers or whatever it is. And so generally speaking, it's chayav with a bracha, even if it has a plastic handle. That seems to be the general accepted halacha. Okay, more simple. An apple core, right? You can buy a metal. All my shilas are obviously going to be talking about metal or glass. An apple core, to remove the inside of an apple, it's for sure chayav with the bracha. A cheese slicer is also going to be chayav. A challah board, if the board itself is glass, it's going to be chayav. A coffee grinder, so that for sure would not be chayav according to the shach, because it's not edible, it's and that's, I think, the majority, but some are machmer. Okay, dentures. If you have dentures, do you need to tovel your dentures? So hopefully you don't have any, but if you do, so definitely not. They do not need to be tovel. Do not show up at the mikvah, pull them out of your mouth, and dip them inside. Besides, it's not needed. You're going to scare your neighbors. And first of all, dentures are not klei seuda. They're batal to your body. They are shina. They are teeth, right? But they're not considered klei seuda. Here is where Rav Shlomo Zalman says the reason. Another reason why it's not it's klei seuda is because it's only for one person. If it's something, you don't share dentures. Anything that's not shared around the table is not called klei seuda for this halacha. Also, I'll just point out, dentures are usually plastic. So plastic, again, is not chayiv. Only so most dentures are not made of porcelain. Usually not. They can be, but it's rare. But anyways, we already said they're not chayiv. I was just adding that. And yes, I'll just point out to you, sometimes, it's rare nowadays, but in the olden days, they would sometimes make plastic dentures and put gold on for one or two of the teeth, because then to make it more realistic. That's just as an aside. Okay, egg slicer, yes, you're chayav. Flour sifter, so many would say it's you don't need to, based on the Shach, the Chayadam, and Rav Heinemann. But okay, meat tenderizer also, most would say you're not chayav. Medicine spoon, so I guess it depends if you call your medicine food or not. So maybe without a bracha, maybe not. Okay, a nutcracker, that's a machlokas. So I would say if you bring it, some would say to do it without a bracha, and some would say not at all, because it never touches the food really. It's just touching the shell, and it's like too far removed. Okay, scissors. This is important to mention.
Nutcrackers have a hook that hold it.
Right. Okay, depends on your nutcracker. Fine, also. Important, I want to mention scissors. Sorry, I'm just going to go a bit more and we'll finish. Scissors are very important to mention because we did mention it earlier on. The Shach brings it down that it's putter, but he's talking about probably scissors that you go to your yard and you cut it at an early stage. Most of us, if we have scissors in our kitchen, we're not talking about the scissors that you keep with your pencils, the scissors that you keep with your cutlery, with your fork and knife. So we generally use it on cooked and non-cooked foods. And so, again, it depends on the usage, but more likely than not, your food scissors would be chayav even with a bracha. Okay, now about a sif and a colander, of course it's going to be chayav. A spoon rest, just to put your spoon on it, it's for sure pater because it's supporting a kli. It's not kli ochel itself. So likewise, a trivet would for sure be pater. Teflon coated dishes generally are chayav without a bracha. Teflon is not metal. And okay, a washing cup that's only used for washing your hands obviously is not chayav at all. Doesn't matter what it's made out of. A kiddush cup, if it was owned by just to think, I don't know, just to make it clear, if it was owned by a goy or manufactured by a non-Jew, either way, it would be chayav, but if it was always only made by a Jew, then it wouldn't be. Anything else you want to quickly mention? So beaters are probably chayav as well with the bracha, but it depends if you only use it for raw dough and never for anything to whip or something that's edible. It depends. It really depends on your usage. Can opener for sure, no, because it's only serving Keilim itself. And just to recap, if I didn't say it before, stuff that's disposable. So that's a machlokes, but I think the general minhag is like Igros Moshe, that says, if it's something that's going to fall apart, which is, that's not going to last forever, even if you use it many times, it's pater like 100%, because it's not a kli that's going to last, doesn't have a din of a kli, it's not called a klei seuda, and anything, aluminum, even heavy-duty aluminum, generally speaking, they don't last. Eventually they get a hole and bent and they fall apart. So then it would be, you don't have to at all. Again, some people are machmer if you're going to use it many times to tovel it without a bracha, but okay, I think that's just a chumrah. And if it's one last thing, what happens if it's something that is that could last forever. I don't know, some kind of a glass container. It could last forever, but it's meant to be chad pa'ami, and